Welcome back to the Patrick Regan Show. Getting used to the new studio here. I'll introduce our producer here, Jay. He's in the booth in there. It's really interesting. The station I came from, my producer sat right to my left, and everybody who watched on the webcam would see him sitting there. And of course, now we don't have a webcam here, but I'll describe for the radio audience. I'm sitting in a room, and he's sitting in a different room.
It's quite the distance.
It is, and I'm used to, during breaks, laughing and cutting up, and now during breaks, I just sit here quietly and look around.
Well, we can laugh and cut up because I can hear you.
It looks like I feel like I'm in detention or something in here.
That's right. You're in trouble.
Yes, I've been bad, and I have to sit in this room quietly and be good. All right. Welcome back to the Patrick Regan Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network. Still the same me. So all the audience out there who came over from the other station here, you'll be familiar with me. But for all the new people, what I'd like to do is give you just a brief introduction of the Patrick Regan Show and what it is we talk about here. Now, this show started about a year ago and has taken off almost since week one. Now, a lot of times people will ask me why I think this show has been successful. And the first thing I like to ask them when I hear this, is do you listen to the show? If they have, then they know why this show is successful. If they haven't, then ask them, why are they interviewing me without having done any background, without at least checking out some clips on our YouTube channel? If I'm not being interviewed, but just talking to someone on the street, I always answer that this show is about original American thinking. What made this country great? At this point, I'll hear something like, well, Patrick, you mean like fighting around the world for freedom, or the morals of this country made it great, or some other myriad of reasons. But it is really rare, frighteningly so, that someone says freedom is what made this country great. Freedom. So I'll ask you this question to think about. Is enforcing the law more important than your individual rights? Is catching a crook more important than your individual rights? It used to be in this country, your individual rights trumped everything else because that was what set us apart from other countries. That is what made America so great. Freedom, liberty, the natural human rights we were all born with and possessed by virtue that we are human. Nothing else. We are human, so we have these rights. The Constitution doesn't grant us these rights. The Constitution restricts what government can do. Our rights are ours without any supporting documentation. Just look at the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. So obvious that we shouldn't have to mention them. That's what self-evident is. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That sentence doesn't say we are granting humans these rights. It says that we are endowed with them. We have them already, just because we are born human. But all of that is being tossed by the wayside. Now we're becoming this collective, this whole Star Trek, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few type of society. The question is, at what point do your wants and needs outweigh my rights? In a free society, they don't. Never will. Your desires and wants never override my rights, because individual rights are the basic foundation of a free society. Your wants are not the basic foundation of a free society. But that's what it has become in this country. Your feelings, your emotional response, whatever you want, all of that overrides my rights to freedom and liberty. All of those things, they're becoming the new foundation of this society because politicians can buy your votes by providing them. That's why you need to be sure and vote in every election if you don't agree with this trend. You need to make sure and vote for people who will reverse this. Even if they're running on third party or 10th party, voting for them, even if they don't get a huge turnout, it still puts the other politicians on notice that there is an undercurrent starting to develop and they better pay attention to it. Now, yes, it's work. And no, you shouldn't have to bother with this type of thing. If we had a government that respected the Constitution and individual rights, we wouldn't have these types of problems occurring. But we don't have that government. We have to deal with reality. And the reality is these people who want all the free stuff are voting. And the only way to stop them is to outvote them. Now, I've played this clip on this show before, just last week as a matter of fact, but for the benefit of all the new listeners here on our new home on 98.7, News Talk 98.7, here are two clips from Ronald Reagan's 1981 inaugural address.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else? It is no coincidence that our present troubles parallel and are proportionate to the intervention and intrusion in our lives that result from unnecessary and excessive growth of government.
That was in 1981. 1981. 32 years ago, and we are still debating this concept today. Do the needs of the many outweigh the rights of the individual? Yes, maybe. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who would agree with that. They do. That is until the government decides something they are doing isn't right. Oh, then there's a problem. But by then it's too late. Everyone has given up so much that the government has the power to continue with this power grab. It's removal of your rights and granting them to itself. That's how it works. The government desperately wants to be human. It wants what you have. It wants your rights, your freedoms. It doesn't want to be constrained by the Constitution. So what does it do? Well, it ignores it. It does as it pleases. And if you continue to allow this sort of behavior, it will only get worse. Any attempt to slow or reverse this trend will be fought tooth and nail. Just look at the government or the country of Syria. We sit over here and say the Syrian government should give up power. They should stop fighting to stay in control of the country. But would our government not do the same thing? If the citizens decided this government is too overbearing, too intrusive, would the United States government voluntarily give up power and allow us to start over? Allow the citizens to take back all the power and start over with a new government and a fresh start? Now, that question is rhetorical in nature because you know the answer. Emphatically, no. You can't get this government to give up wasteful spending programs that aren't benefiting anyone other than the bureaucrats in charge. If they won't even make cuts to existing inefficiencies, then you know there is no way they would tolerate any sort of proposal for a total dismantling and starting over in this country. They would label everyone calling for that terrorist, or at the least crazy extremist, and lock you away for plotting against the United States. But if the same thing happens in Syria, if people start deciding that the government needs to go, then our government starts calling on the Syrian officials to resign and leave their posts. How much more hypocritical can you be? Oh, but Patrick, you'll say, the Syrian regime, it's killing people. It's killing their people. Well, we're doing the same thing. In fact, we don't limit it to just people here in our country. We go outside this country and killed so-called terrorists in other countries with drone attacks. These people aren't even allowed a day in court to contest the charges of being labeled a terrorist. They are just killed by our government because, hey, we say they're guilty. Does that in any way sound fair to you? Does that sound like a government that believes every human is born with inalienable rights? It doesn't. It's not. And this government doesn't believe that. We are up on the bottom of the hour break already here on the Patrick Regan Show. This show just flies by, even at the news station. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about libertarianism. We'll try to work in some stuff about drugs and war and Benghazi and all sorts of good stuff. Join us in a couple of minutes right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI and the Patrick Regan Show.